Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. It's not very often that new research articles in Old Norse and runes make headlines around the world, but this week one did. Unfortunately, the headlines mostly get it wrong. Let me give you some pointers about the real article and its actual research findings. Now, as someone who has consulted on media projects myself over the years, I am aware that your average journalist, with wonderful exceptions, considers 5 minutes of Google Translate and Wikipedia the equivalent of a Ph.D. So it's not a huge surprise that when actual research articles wind up in the news, often their findings are distorted either by misunderstanding or by trying to twist them to look like they're more tied into current concerns and news stories than they are. In this case, what's happened is that 4 researchers at universities in Sweden, who are Per Holmberg, Bo Gräslund, Olof Sundqvist, and Henrik Williams, have published an article called The Ruk Runestone and the End of the World in Futhark, the International Journal of Runic Studies. Now, what this article does is take a mysterious inscription on a runestone from the early 800s called the Rukstone and reinterpret it as being a reference to some previous climate catastrophes in Sweden. Now, what's happened is people have taken this and turned it from previous climate catastrophe to future climate catastrophes. So, for instance, I've seen headlines like Viking runestone predicts global warming crisis and that kind of thing. Even news outlets that don't distort the message use current climate change terminology to kind of disguise the studies being related to that kind of stuff. Even CNN took a break from reporting on it, the names that it's given to every one of Trump's nose hairs, to talk about this a little bit. But let me give you a feel for what this actually says in the real article, which, by the way, thanks to Gareth Brandt for pointing me to it. I'll give a link to where you can find the article on screen too. The Ruk runestone, in brief, is, I think, actually the longest inscribed runestone from the Viking Age. It is in the younger Futhark, which are the type of runes typically used during the Viking Age, although it also includes some coded runes, which are very cool, as well as a couple lines in the elder Futhark, the more famous runic alphabet that had actually gone out of use by the Viking Age. Now that itself is cool, although the way the Elder Futhark is used shows that the writer is still thinking of it in terms of substitutions for younger Futhark characters, so it shows the Elder Futhark's not a living tradition anymore. The words in the inscription are not necessarily the problem. Word by word, you can usually tell what something is. It's that altogether the message is very vague and weird. So there have been a lot of different interpretations over the last 150 years or so. What this paper does that's really unique is that it's actually done by well-informed specialists. Henrik Williams, in particular, is one of the best-known masters of runology today, and purports to read the entire message on the stone as having to do with previous climate catastrophes. Now, whether you buy that explanation or not is, of course, up to you. I am a little personally skeptical of taking things that happened hundreds of years before as being the message behind a carved runestone in a mostly pre-literate society. But you know, it's not a bad argument. You can but you can be skeptical of it or buy it as you please. But let me give you a few lines and what they interpret it as, so you can get a sense of what the real article is about. Here's a part of it, for instance. Hvar for níu aldum an úr því fjaru með hræðgutum, og dömer en sakkar. and what you see is their early 800s Old Swedish, and I'm pronouncing it as roughly that might have been pronounced. And the way they translate this is, who 9 generations ago lost their life with the Hræðgutar, i.e. in the east, but still decides the matter. They see this as a question. And the answer is the sun. So what they see this as is the runestone being written in the early 800s is talking about something that happened 9 generations ago. So that would be in the early 500s, mid 500s perhaps. And in March 536, there was in fact a solar eclipse right after dawn that would have been visible from Sweden. And so they see this as the loss or death of the sun that's being referred to. What lost its life in the east, because the Hræðgutar are stereotypically in the east, and still decides the matter, so it's still alive. Now again, this is a lot to read into, very vague lines, but it is interesting, it is a compelling argument. And indeed, right around 536, there were a lot of things that might have made people think the world was ending. Not just the solar eclipse right after sunrise, but also heavy volcanic activity in the Americas might have darkened the sun, created ash clouds all over the world, as seems to be reported in Byzantine writings. This could have caused famine, is reported in Ireland at the time. And also, quite possibly, that volcanic activity actually colored skies in the northern hemisphere, such as in Sweden, red. So this could have caused people to believe that the end of the world, or Ragnarok, was coming, but that the world was reborn afterwards. Since the sun did, in fact, come back, the skies did go back to normal, climatic conditions returned to normal. Now, is this early runestone talking about events 9 generations before that intimidated their great, I think it's the right number, grandfathers? I don't know, but it's an interesting argument from well-informed people, and it deserves to be read on its own without being distorted as a message about some kind of prophecy of future climate change, such as concerns people in the 21st century. Well, I hope that has been a reasonably informative look at this question for you. I do have more videos about runes and many other subjects in Norse language and myth on this channel that you can look at if you'd like. This channel is supported by my generous Patreon supporters, and I am also a translator of the major sources of Norse mythology into English, my most recent work being The Wanderer's Havamal, which offers both the Old Norse text and an English translation with thorough commentary. For now, from Crawford Gulch in beautiful Colorado, let me wish you all the best. The whole point of this video channel, the whole point of my books, is to bring good information about these subjects to the people who want it in the places where they're looking for it online. Otherwise, the people who know what they're talking about are all trying to impress each other, talking to each other in the ivory tower, and they're never reaching out to the public. The people who are reaching out to the public on YouTube or wherever else mostly are scared, angry people trying to spread centuries-old, cartoonish racialist theories and crazy mysticism that has nothing to do with our medieval sources. I want to bring good information about our real medieval sources straight to you in the places where you're looking for it, without an agenda, without trying to set myself up as some ivory tower super genius who's better than you. You can help me do that by donating small monthly amounts on my Patreon. And everyone who does that has my everlasting thanks for your incredible generosity and the way that you help me make a university of my favorite place in the world, the Great Rocky Mountain Outdoors. Well, from now, from the middle of beautiful Colorado, let me wish you good thinking, good skepticism, and all the very best.